This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J. This morning, Kristen McQuarrie from the Chicago Tribune editorial board, and we had Trump tweeting yesterday into the early morning hours about Michael Cohen, including not giving him a very good Angie's List review. If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. Yeah, that's not surprising.
I think he's going to be quite busy with other things for a while. I don't think he's going to be providing very many legal services.
Well, he should use his law license while he still has it. So I chop, and Lanny Davis was on the Megyn Kelly show basically saying he'll fix things for food.
Right.
So
I already made my donation this morning to his GoFundMe page.
I'm sure after that
compelling case of his destitute. Yes.
Open your hearts, won't you? Lanny Davis should be doing telethons, really. Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning talking about Michael Cohen's guilty plea and taking the position that obviously his legal representation is taken, but so has Alan Dershowitz and Mark Levin and others, that there is no crime here with respect to the hush money payment. Interesting post, one of our listeners posted on my Facebook page about, remember the slush fund that was discovered that Congress had to pay out using taxpayer dollars accusations of sexual harassment and other misconduct by members of Congress?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's taxpayer dollars, so I guess it's okay. Private dollars. Interesting point. The hypocrisy, not really so much a commentary on campaign finance law and the underlying argument here, but it is a great point on the hypocrisy. Trump was also asked about pardons. Of course, Michael Cohen has too much integrity to accept a pardon. None is being offered or forthcoming, I suspect. But on Manafort, Trump was a little bit more cagey.
Are you considering pardoning Paul Manafort?
I have great respect for what he's done in terms of what he's gone through. You know, he worked for Ronald Reagan for years. He worked for Bob Dole. He worked, I guess his firm worked for McCain. He worked for many, many people, many, many years. And I would say what he did, some of the charges they threw against him, every consultant, every lobbyist in Washington probably does. I didn't know Manafort well. He wasn't with the campaign long. They got him on things totally unrelated to the campaign. And by the way, they got Cohen on totally unrelated to the campaign. I'm not involved. I wasn't charged with anything. You know, people don't like to say that, but I wasn't charged. But when you look at the corruption on the other side, and they refuse to look at anything. When you don't look at Strzok, where he said basically we're going to take out the president, the insurance policy and everything else. You look at Lisa Page, the two lovers back and forth with these horrible texts. You look at the kind of talk going on about, it's really subversion. And our Justice Department doesn't do anything about it. People would say, oh, but you appointed Jeff Sessions. I said, I did. But I really feel as long as this is going out, I don't have to do this, but I will stay uninvolved, and maybe that's the best thing to do.
Is that a no regarding the pardoning of Manafort? I didn't really get an answer there. The other thing is, again, wordsmithing isn't Trump's forte, but for the President of the United States to be saying, I wasn't charged with anything, that's not a headline that you want. It's almost stripes-worthy, never convicted. For more on this topic, including A.G. Sessions, which Trump spoke about some more in that interview, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor at National Review. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Good morning.
Good morning. So why don't we start with the underlying debate about whether or not the hush money does constitute a campaign contribution subject to campaign finance laws. You've, of course, I'm sure, been exposed to the arguments being made by not just the president, but Dershowitz and Levin. What say you to that topic?
Well, I think that the confusion here, and it really is confusion, I've been trying to harp, Dan, on the argument that even assuming that it is a campaign violation, it's a very tough proof against Trump. It's not one that I would, as a prosecutor, approve based on the facts that we have now. But, to confront the underlying question, is it or isn't it, I think the problem we have now is that, and I've spent a couple of hours looking into this between last night and this morning, it seems to me that the Justice Department and the Federal Election Commission are operating on two different sets of assumptions. And the reason that we have such debate is the Justice Department has taken the position in the past that it is a crime, and the FEC, particularly Mark's interview, who was it, with Bradley who had the election finance background? I can't remember exactly who it was, but right. So Mark, they take the position that it's a much more narrow, that the idea of in-kind contributions is much more narrow, almost to the point where it's like different in kind from what the Justice Department is saying. And I think that the other thing in the mix that muddies the waters is, even though the Justice Department has taken the position that this is a crime, the place where they famously did that was in the John Edwards prosecution.
Right, and
they
was
lost.
Hung jury, right.
Yeah, so they lost, and then I think that scared them off. But to the extent people are saying, they lost, therefore they were wrong, they're leaving out the inconvenience that they lost. But first of all, as you point out, it was a hung jury. And secondly, that means that the judge let the case go to the jury. A judge can't let a case go to the jury unless the judge decides that there's enough evidence for a rational jury to find a crime. Whether they do or not is a separate thing. So I think it's really one of these situations where you have a statute and a set of regulations that can be interpreted more than one way, and you have the federal agency that is, you would think, the most authoritative in interpreting it, saying no, and that would be the Federal Election Commission. And then you have the agency that's in charge with deciding what can be prosecuted, saying yes. And as a result, I'm not sure we're going to resolve that. And I'm more comfortable simply making the argument that, given the high intent, the high intent standard here, and the facts that Trump wouldn't have had the campaign finance laws in the front of his mind, since he, as the candidate, he has to report, but he can spend whatever he wants to spend.
Right.
He had other reasons for wanting to keep this information suppressed besides the election, even though I think the election was clearly one of the reasons. And he's not a lawyer. So you deal with all of that, and then you remain mindful of the fact that they have to prove willfulness, which almost defies the old legal adage that ignorance of the law is no excuse. When a statute adopts a willfulness standard, you really have to prove that somebody was aware specifically that his conduct was in violation of the law. I don't see how Trump would ever be charged with this.
And when you say the Justice Department has said it was a crime, we're still just talking about the lack of reporting as an in-kind, right?
And the excessive.
And the excessive amount,
limits,
but
right.
not that it couldn't, not that the hush money itself, the payment was illegal, but just the lack of reporting as an in-kind and the amount.
Yeah, Kristen, I noticed that one of the things the left is much better at us than us is in framing the narrative. I guess because they have the media following them in kind. So I think Lanny Davis really tried to frame the way that we should understand this, and everybody has been sort of echoing that since then. So he comes out and says that this was what made this illegal was that it was a payment to influence the election. And what it leads people to believe is that the payment itself, that is the entering into a hush money arrangement, is illegal. And, they do this. A lot of these good government types do this sort of thing all the time. They are offended by the underlying conduct, but the sad fact for them is that the underlying conduct is not illegal. So they try to find some, regulation that may technically apply to it and say they violated the regulation, but what they're really trying to do is criminalize the underlying conduct that they don't like, right? So here, the underlying conduct is this hush money payment to cover up these sexual liaisons, and try as they might, that simply isn't illegal. The non-disclosure arrangements are entered into all the time, sometimes for savory reasons, sometimes for good business reasons, sometimes for probably other reasons. But the fact is they're not illegal.
Right.
And for those who suggest that, that's what's going on here, what they tried to do was cover up a tawdry misconduct that Trump was involved in like 12 years ago. They're just wrong. It's not a crime.
You were former chief assistant U.S. attorney in Manhattan, so you're more than qualified to answer this hypothetical. If you were Rod Rosenstein, what would you be doing differently, if anything, at this point in terms of overseeing the Mueller investigation?
It's a hard question, Dan, because we don't know exactly what he is doing. And for all the noise out there about Mueller, and there's a lot of it, the things I keep coming back to that we can observe from the outside is that Mueller has never brought a case, even though he has brought cases against Russians involved in the hacking and in the troll farms and all that stuff. He has never, in all this time, brought a single case that remotely suggested that Trump was involved in collusion with Russia. And I think it's more important what he does than what people say about what he does.
And why?
And it has seemed to me for a long time that he's focused on, with respect to Trump, he's focused on obstruction, not collusion.
What about just?
And I don't think. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, what about just the financial crimes? To me, that seems to be like we might see a pivot here, that we're not really going to focus on Russia collusion. But if Trump has some dirty laundry regarding his own taxes, regarding his own loans, which this is not someone who is crossed T's and dotted I's, and this is something that Cohen might have evidence on or might be able to lead them on. Do you see this kind of pivoting into more of a financial problem for Trump if he did cut corners when it comes to his own finances and taxes?
But that's outside Mueller's scope.
But he's already outside the scope.
Kristen, in answer to that question, what I keep coming back to on Mueller is this. Mueller had Cohen first, and he decided he was not useful to Cohen's investigation and transferred the case to the Southern District of New York. I don't think they're going after Trump's businesses, and I would be surprised, other than like penny ante stuff, I would be surprised if Cohen knew all that much. Remember, Trump used Cohen for the things he used him for, and this kind of stuff with Stormy Daniels and Miss McDougal, some savory stuff. But it doesn't look to me either like Cohen is much of a lawyer or that he would have been of much use to the Trump organization. And until I see something that connects him to something that's actually big and important, I'm going to assume that what we know now about Cohen is what we're going to know, and he's such an unreliable source of information. I mean, his statements have been contradictory and all over the lot. Notice that when he pled guilty, he didn't plead to a cooperation agreement. He pled to a straight-up guilty plea, which suggests to me that between Mueller giving his case to the Southern District and the Southern District not signing him up as a cooperator, I don't think they see him as much of a witness.
Cohen is Fredo. He's Fredo in this story.
Well, but he initially came into the Trump circle, though, also through the foundation. So, and that is still the New York IRS version, the state version, is now stepping up its case, and the Attorney General is still looking at that. I don't know. Maybe it's nothing, but I would be nervous if I were Trump.
Well,
yeah. Look, anytime they have somebody in their control, and you're talking about prosecutors, and some of them look like they're hell bent on making a case, especially New York is so political. I mean, I know Schneiderman is out of there, but it's one of the most politicized attorney general's offices in the country. So naturally, you'd have to be concerned. But you also have to remember that Trump swum like a shark in those waters for a very, very long time, and he still managed to get himself elected president. So
that's true.
Wanted to get your take on Michael Flynn's sentencing being pushed off again now till September. Is that a decision that was prompted by the Manafort convictions, or what do you think is going on there?
I don't think so, Dan. I think this is standard fare. As I said a couple of minutes ago, I really think for Mueller, the Trump case is now an obstruction case, not a collusion case. And if there is an obstruction, I want to underscore here, I'm not saying there is an obstruction case. I'm saying that's what Mueller's focused on, whether there is or there isn't. Mm-hmm. If there is one, Flynn is a witness, right? So the standard practice is when you have cooperators, you don't get them sentenced until their cooperation is finished, which includes any testimony. So if Mueller agreed to have Flynn sentenced at this point, that would be tantamount to saying his investigation is completed. And I don't think he's ready to say that. Now, it doesn't mean that, a report is imminent saying that Trump obstructed justice. But what it means is Mueller is not ready to wrap up. And if I were the prosecutor, I would not allow the cooperators on the thing I was investigating to be sentenced until I was satisfied that I was ready to write my report and wrap up.
He is Andy McCarthy, always helping us wade through the noise with respect to these sundry legal issues. Former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, contributing at National Review, must read at nationalreview.com on all things legalese related. Andy, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. Join us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.